Have you ever given everything to someone only to be treated like you're nothing? That was me, Martha Reynolds, cast aside by my son and his wife like an old newspaper. Uninvited from Sunday dinners, blocked from seeing my grandchildren, erased from family photos. But they didn't know one crucial thing. I held the keys to the beautiful colonial home they were so proud of. This is the story of how I reclaimed my dignity, rebuilt my life, and taught my son and his wife the hardest lesson they'd ever learn. That some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was my son Andrew's 35th birthday. I remember standing on the porch of the colonial home I'd helped them buy, a homemade apple pie balanced in one hand and a beautifully wrapped gift in the other. The early autumn air had that perfect crispness to it, leaves just beginning to turn their brilliant shades of amber and gold. I'd spent 3 days on that pie, making it exactly how Andrew had loved it since he was small. I rang the doorbell, my heart light with anticipation. After a longer than usual wait, the door swung open to reveal Vanessa, my daughter-in-law of 7 years, dressed impeccably as always. Her face did that thing, that barely perceptible tightening around the eyes, when she saw me. "Martha," she said, not stepping aside to let me in. "We weren't expecting you today." I tilted my head, confused. "It's Andrew's birthday dinner. We always do Sunday dinner for birthdays." Behind her, I could see their dining room table set for company. Crystal, glasses catching the light. The good china she only used for special occasions. The sounds of laughter and conversation drifted from their kitchen. I recognized Andrew's voice, the deeper tones of his father-in-law, Richard, and what sounded like Vanessa's sister, Diane. "We decided to keep it small this year," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "You know how Andrew gets overwhelmed with too many people?" I blinked, trying to process her words. Too many people? But it's his family. I'm his mother. Something hardened in her eyes. "Martha, we've been over this. Andrew needs space from certain influences. His therapist thinks it's best if he limits contact with triggers from his past." "Triggers? What are you talking about?" "I'm his mother, not some traumatic event." That's when Andrew appeared behind her, a glass of wine in his hand. He looked uncomfortable, but not surprised to see me standing there, uninvited to his birthday dinner. "Mom, hey," he said, awkwardly. "Vanessa was just explaining. We're trying something different this year." I stood there, pie cooling in my hands, gift bag dangling from my wrist, as my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his father walked out when he was just 4, looked at me like I was a stranger who had shown up unexpectedly. "I see," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, I brought your favorite pie, and a gift." Vanessa reached out, taking both items with a practiced smile. "That's thoughtful. I'll make sure everyone gets a slice." "When would be a good time for us to celebrate together?" I asked, looking directly at Andrew. He glanced at Vanessa before answering. "Things are pretty hectic right now with work and the kids' schedules. I'll call you, okay?" I nodded, knowing he wouldn't. This wasn't the first time they'd excluded me, just the most blatant. For months, the invitations had become scarcer, the calls shorter, the excuses more elaborate. But this, being turned away at the door while they entertained Vanessa's family inside, this was something else entirely. "Enjoy your evening," I said, turning to leave. I made it halfway down the porch, steps before Andrew called after me. "Mom, wait." I paused, hope rising. Maybe he'd come to his senses. "Can you drop off Emma's soccer uniform tomorrow? She left it at your place last time." And just like that, the hope dissolved. I was good enough to do their laundry and babysit. When needed, but not good enough to celebrate my own son's birthday. I'll drop it in your mailbox, I said, and continued walking to my car. As I drove home, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. I thought about all the birthdays I'd made special for Andrew over the years. The dinosaur-themed party, when he was 6, where I'd stayed up all night making papier-mâché volcanoes. The surprise 16th, where I'd saved for months to get him those expensive basketball shoes he wanted. The graduation celebration where I'd invited everyone he knew and rented out the community center. And now, at 35, he'd let himself be convinced that I was a trigger he needed to avoid. Back in my small ranch house, the one I'd downsized to after helping Andrew and Vanessa with their down payment, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the folder I kept in my desk. Inside were all the financial records from when I'd helped them buy that beautiful Colonial, the transfer of my retirement savings for their down payment, the mortgage paperwork listing me as co-owner, the monthly statements showing I was still making half the payments. My late husband Thomas had been a careful man financially. When he passed from cancer 10 years ago, he'd left me well provided for with a life insurance policy and our mortgage-free home. I'd never intended to use that money for myself. It was always for Andrew, for his future. 3 years ago, when Andrew and Vanessa found that Colonial, a gorgeous 1920s home with original woodwork and a wraparound porch, they'd been devastated. To learn they couldn't qualify for the mortgage on their own. Vanessa's spending habits and Andrew's modest teacher's salary weren't enough for the bank. That's when I stepped in, offering my savings for the down payment and agreeing to co-sign the mortgage. "It'll just be temporary, Mom," Andrew had assured me. "Once Vanessa's interior design business takes off and I make department head, we'll refinance and get you off the loan." I'd believed him. I'd wanted to believe him. What I hadn't told them was that after discussing it with my financial advisor, I hadn't just co-signed. I'd structured the deal so that I owned 51% of the property. It had been my advisor's suggestion, a protection in case things went south. "Just a precaution," he'd said. "Family business and financial business should always have clear boundaries." At the time, I'd felt almost guilty about it, like I was being overly cautious with my own son. Now, as I stared at the paperwork, a different emotion was taking hold. That same week, I received a text from Vanessa asking if I could watch the kids, my grandchildren Emma, 8, and Tyler, 5, during their upcoming anniversary weekend. "We're thinking of going to the Hamptons," the text read. "The kids would slow us down." No please. No acknowledgement that she was asking a favor from someone she'd just turned away from her home. Just an expectation that I would be available, willing and grateful for the chance to see my grandchildren. I'd always said yes before. I'd rearranged work schedules, canceled my own plans, even once postponed a minor surgery to accommodate their requests. I'd been so afraid of being cut off from Emma and Tyler that I'd made myself endlessly available, a free babysitter on call. But something had changed in me as I stood on that porch, holding a pie no one wanted. I texted back, "I'm sorry, I have plans that weekend." 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, "What plans?" I didn't owe her an explanation, but I gave one anyway. "I'm meeting with my financial advisor to review my portfolio." 6 hours later, Andrew called. His voice had that forced casualness that told me he was following a script Vanessa had prepared. "Hey, Mom, about this weekend. It's really important to us. It's our anniversary, and this trip is kind of a big deal for our marriage. We really need someone we trust with the kids." "I understand," I said, "but I've already scheduled this meeting, and it's important to me." "Can't you reschedule? It's just a meeting." "Can't you reschedule? It's just an anniversary," I countered, surprising myself with my boldness. There was a pause, then Andrew's voice turned cold. "Wow. Okay, I guess we know where we stand." "Yes," I said quietly. "I guess we do." After hanging up, I sat on my back porch, watching the cardinals at my bird feeder. I thought about all I'd given up for my son, the career opportunities I'd passed on to stay in our hometown, the men I hadn't dated because Andrew wasn't ready for me to move on after his father. The retirement savings now tied up in a house where I wasn't welcome. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to feel anger. Real, cleansing anger. Not the kind you swallow down with a forced smile, but the kind that burns through the fog and shows you a path forward. I reached for my phone and called my financial advisor, Carson Miller. "Carson," I said when he answered. "Remember that contingency plan we discussed regarding Andrew's house? I think it's time we revisited it." "Are you sure, Martha?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "This will change your relationship with your son." I thought about the dinner happening without me, the pity in Vanessa's eyes, the way Andrew had looked through me rather than at me. "The relationship has already changed," I said firmly. "Now it's time I protected myself." Little did Andrew and Vanessa know, their perfectly curated life was built on a foundation they didn't fully understand. And I was about to make some renovations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who'd need leverage over her own child. That's not who Thomas and I raised Andrew to be. Thomas and I met in college. He was studying engineering, and I was pursuing a degree in accounting. We married. Young, perhaps too young, but we were determined to make it work. When Andrew came along, we were overjoyed. Thomas worked long hours at his firm while I balanced part-time accounting work with raising our son. But when Andrew was 4, Thomas was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. The prognosis was grim from the start. "Martha," Thomas had said to me one night in the hospital, his voice thin but his eyes clear, "promise me you'll make sure Andrew grows up knowing what matters. Not money or status, but kindness, integrity, and gratitude." I promised. And for 16 years, I did everything I could to keep that promise. After Thomas passed, it was just Andrew and me against the world. I took on extra clients, worked weekends, and picked up consulting jobs to ensure Andrew never felt the financial strain of being in a single-parent household. When Andrew got accepted to Princeton, his father's alma mater, I remortgaged our house to help with tuition. "It's what your dad would have wanted," I told him, pushing away my worries about retirement. The pride in his eyes made it worthwhile. During his sophomore year, Andrew called me, more animated than I'd heard him in years. "Mom, I met someone. Her name is Vanessa Clark. She's incredible, studying art history and business. I think she might be the one." I was thrilled for him. When I finally met Vanessa during Parents' Weekend, I understood the attraction. She was poised, articulate, and undeniably beautiful, with that kind of polished confidence that comes from growing up with money. Her parents owned a chain of luxury boutique hotels, and she carried herself with the certainty of someone who'd never had to worry about making ends meet. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Reynolds," she'd said, extending a manicured hand. "Andrew talks about you constantly." I noted the slight widening of her eyes as she took in my sensible shoes and department store dress, but I brushed it aside. Not everyone could understand the sacrifices single parents made. After graduation, Andrew proposed to Vanessa with his grandmother's ring, the only family heirloom we had of any value. I'd offered it to him, of course, but a small part of me had hoped he might choose something else, allowing me to keep that connection to my past. Their wedding was elaborate, held at one of the Clark family's properties in Newport. I felt out of place among the wealthy guests, the lavish floral arrangements, the 5-course dinner. Vanessa's father, Richard, had insisted on paying for everything, making it clear that my teacher's salary contribution wasn't necessary. During the reception, I overheard Vanessa's mother talking to another guest. "Andrew's a dear boy," she said, swirling her champagne. Rough around the edges, of course, but Vanessa has always had a thing for projects. Martha did her best, considering the circumstances. I pretended not to hear, focusing instead on how happy Andrew looked in his tuxedo, dancing with his new bride. After the honeymoon, they settled in Manhattan, where Vanessa had connections that helped Andrew land a position at a prestigious private school. Meanwhile, I continued teaching math at the public high school in our Connecticut town, the same one Andrew had attended. Our Sunday dinners began then, a tradition I initiated to stay connected as Andrew built his new life. At first, they would drive out to my place every few weeks. I'd cook Andrew's favorites and we'd catch up on everything. Vanessa was always polite, if a bit distant, often checking her phone or bringing up renovation plans for their apartment. When they announced they were expecting Emma, I was ecstatic. A grandchild, a new chapter for our small family. I threw myself into preparations, converting my home office into a nursery for visits, knitting blankets, reading every current book on infant care. The day Emma was born was one of the happiest of my life. Holding her tiny body, I saw Thomas in her features, the same determined chin, the same inquisitive eyes. "She's perfect," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Vanessa and Andrew moved to a larger apartment, and I found myself driving into the city more frequently to help with the baby. I'd take days off from teaching to babysit when their nanny called in sick. I'd bring homemade meals and quietly do their laundry while Vanessa napped. When Tyler came along 3 years later, the pattern continued. I was their safety net, their backup plan, their emergency contact, and I loved it. Loved being needed, loved being part of their lives. Then came the colonial house. Vanessa had seen it online, a historic 5-bedroom in a prestigious Connecticut suburb, not far from where I lived. It needed work, but it had potential, she said. The schools are excellent, Andrew explained during a Sunday dinner at my place. And it would mean the kids could see you more often. My heart soared at the thought. That sounds wonderful, I said. Vanessa smiled tightly. The commute will be longer for Andrew, but we think it's worth it. The only issue is the down payment. These old houses are expensive, and with the renovations it needs, I recognized the opening for what it was. I could help, I offered, perhaps too quickly. I've been saving, and with the value of this house, I didn't mention that those savings were my retirement fund, carefully built over decades of modest living. I didn't mention that selling my house meant giving up the home where Andrew had grown up, where Thomas and I had built our life together. We couldn't possibly, Vanessa protested, but her eyes told a different story. 2 months later, I signed over a check for $175,000, nearly everything I had, for their down payment. I sold my house, moving into a small ranch that needed work, but was within my budget after helping them. I co-signed their mortgage because their debt-to-income ratio was too high for approval otherwise. This is temporary, Mom, Andrew assured me. Once Vanessa's design business takes off, we'll refinance. You won't be tied to our mortgage long. My financial advisor, Carson, had been opposed to the entire arrangement. Martha, this is your retirement we're talking about, he warned. At the very least, get your name on the deed. Make it official that you own a percentage of the property. I followed his advice, structuring the deal so that I owned 51% of the house. At the closing, when the lawyer mentioned this detail, Vanessa's brow furrowed momentarily, but Andrew squeezed her hand and nodded reassuringly. Just a formality, he told her. Mom's just looking out for all of us. The first year in the Colonial was idyllic. Sunday dinners moved to their house, where I'd admire the renovations Vanessa had made, always with my taste gently critiqued. In the process, Martha, you have such a traditional aesthetic, she'd say, rearranging the flowers I'd brought or moving the serving dishes I'd set out. I'd help with the children while they entertained friends, successful couples from Andrew's school and Vanessa's design circle. Occasionally, I'd be invited to join for coffee or dessert, but more often, I'd quietly slip out the back door with a kiss on each grandchild's forehead. The changes were subtle at first. Sunday dinners became bi-weekly, then monthly. My calls went to voicemail more frequently. When I did see the children, they had new mannerisms, new preferences I hadn't been informed about. "Oh, Emma doesn't eat dairy anymore," Vanessa would say, taking away the mac and cheese I'd prepared. "And Tyler's on a strict screen time schedule. No television during playdates, Martha." They weren't playdates, I wanted to say. They were visits with their grandmother. But I stayed silent, adapting, always adapting. Then came the missed birthdays. Mine, not theirs. The canceled plans when something more important came up. The way they'd drop the children off with a list of instructions, as if I were a new babysitter, not the woman who had raised their father. More concerning were the comments I began to overhear. "Grandma's house is kind of small," Emma said once, echoing what she'd clearly heard at home. "Mommy says Grandma doesn't understand boundaries," Tyler announced another time, repeating a phrase no 5-year-old would come up with on their own. Despite everything, I kept making the mortgage payments each month. The arrangement had been that I would contribute until they could refinance. But whenever I brought it up, there was always a reason why the timing wasn't right. "The market's not favorable right now," Andrew would say. "We've put so much into renovations, we need to let the property value increase first," Vanessa would explain. So I continued writing the checks, watching my savings dwindle, putting off my own home repairs to ensure they kept their perfect colonial with its manicured lawn and newly renovated kitchen. Until that day on the porch, holding a pie no one wanted, finally understanding that I'd been gradually, deliberately pushed to the margins of my own family. Now, sitting in Carson's office the following week, I was ready to hear my options. "The good news," Carson said, sliding a folder across his desk, "is that you've been smart enough to keep everything documented. The bad news is that any action you take will likely end your relationship with Andrew as you know it." I nodded, my heart heavy, but my resolve strengthening. "I understand the risks, but I need to know, what exactly can I do?" Carson Miller had been my financial advisor since Thomas passed away. He'd helped me navigate widowhood, college tuition, and retirement, planning with steady guidance and occasional tough love. Today, he wasn't holding back. "Martha, let me be direct," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You've been subsidizing Andrew and Vanessa's lifestyle at the expense of your own financial security. Based on your current trajectory, you'll deplete your savings within 5 years." Turned his computer monitor so I could see the projection graph. The red line representing my assets plummeted sharply downward, while the blue line representing Andrew and Vanessa's property value climbed steadily upward. "And that assumes you stay healthy," he added quietly. The implications hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on helping Andrew that I'd put my own future at risk. If I needed long-term care or faced a major health crisis, I would have nothing left. "What are my options?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Carson leaned back in, his chair. "Option 1, continue as is. Hope they eventually refinance as promised and significantly reduce your standard of living to stretch your remaining funds." I shook my head. That path led nowhere good. Option 2, formally request they buy out your portion of the house. Given your 51% ownership, that would be a significant sum, approximately $325,000 based on current market value. "They don't have that kind of money," I said automatically, then paused. How strange that I knew that about their finances when they clearly had never worried about mine. "Option 3, Carson continued, is the nuclear option. You could force a sale of the property." My breath caught. Force a sale? Of their home? Legally, it's your home too. In fact, it's primarily your home on paper. As the majority owner, you have the right to petition for partition, which would force a sale and division of proceeds according to ownership percentages. I stared out the window of his office, watching leaves scatter across the parking lot. The thought of forcing Andrew and his family out of their home made me physically ill. But the image of myself, elderly and impoverished, possibly homeless while they lived in luxury partly purchased with my money, that was equally unbearable. There is a fourth option, Carson said gently. A renegotiation. We redraw the agreement, setting firm terms for your investment. They either begin buying out your share in installments, or they refinance immediately to remove you from the mortgage but add clear rental payments to you for the portion you own. I nodded slowly. That seems fair. Fair, yes, Carson agreed. But will they see it that way? From what you've told me, they've grown accustomed to your financial support without acknowledgement or reciprocation. He was right. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone had been marked by my generosity, college tuition, wedding contributions, house down payment, ongoing mortgage payments, while my own needs were treated as afterthoughts. Even this meeting with Carson had been painted as selfish when it interfered with their anniversary plans. Sleep on it, Carson advised, closing the folder. This isn't a decision to make in the heat of emotion. But as I drove home, emotion was all I could feel. Not just anger or hurt, but a profound disappointment. What had happened to the boy who once made me Mother's Day cards proclaiming me his hero? Where was the young man who'd promised to take care of me in my old age, just as I'd cared for him? At home, I found a package on my doorstep. It was Emma's soccer uniform in a plastic grocery bag, dropped off without even a note. Somehow, that small, thoughtless act crystallized everything. I had become a utility to them, useful when needed, invisible when not. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my small living room, thinking about Thomas and what he would say if he could see how things had turned out. He'd always believed in setting clear boundaries and expecting accountability. Love without respect isn't really love at all, he used to say. Around midnight, my phone chimed with a text from Vanessa. Since you're busy this weekend, can you at least drop off the kids' favorite snacks and Emma's iPad before we leave Friday? Also, Tyler needs his special pillow from our house. Can you pick it up tomorrow? No, please. No acknowledgement that I had declined to babysit. Just more demands, as if my time belonged to them by default. Something inside me snapped. I typed, back. I'm afraid I won't be able to do that. As I mentioned, I have an important appointment regarding my financial future. Her response was immediate. This is really disappointing, Martha. We counted on you. What financial appointment could possibly be so important? I sat with that question for a long moment. What financial appointment could possibly be so important? Only the one that would determine whether I spent my golden years with dignity or destitution. Only the one that would establish whether the decades of sacrifices I'd made for my family had any meaning at all. I wrote back, I'm meeting with Carson to discuss the mortgage on your house. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, what about our mortgage? That's between us and the bank. And me, I replied. As you may recall, I'm on the mortgage and own 51% of the property. No response came. I imagined she was waking Andrew, showing him the texts, both of them suddenly remembering the paperwork they'd signed 3 years ago, the formality they'd dismissed. The next morning, Andrew called. His voice had that forced casualness again, but with an undercurrent of tension. Hey, Mom, about this weekend. We've rescheduled our trip. Vanessa's not feeling well. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, matching his casual tone. So, about the mortgage. Vanessa mentioned you brought it up? Yes, I've been reviewing my finances with Carson. We need to discuss the current arrangement. A pause. What's there to discuss? We've been making the payments on time. Half the payments, I corrected. I've been making the other half, as you know, and we agreed that was temporary until you refinanced. Right, he said quickly. We've just been so busy with the kids and work, but we can definitely look into that soon. Soon isn't specific. Enough anymore, Andrew. I need us to set a concrete timeline. His tone shifted, a familiar defensiveness creeping in. Mom, is this about the birthday dinner? Because if you're upset about that, this isn't about any one incident, I interrupted. This is about my financial security and our agreement. I've supported you throughout your life, emotionally, practically, and financially. Now I need to ensure I've planned properly for my own future. So what are you saying? His voice had a hard edge now. That you want us to pay you back all at once? Because that's not possible right now. I'm saying we need to meet and discuss options. All of us, including Carson. You want my wife to meet with your financial advisor? He sounded incredulous. Mom, that's crossing a line. I took a deep breath. The line was crossed when I put my retirement savings into your home and continued making mortgage payments with no end in sight. The line was crossed when I was turned away from your birthday dinner, but still expected to provide free childcare and errands at your convenience. The line was crossed when my grandchildren began repeating things they've heard about me being difficult or not understanding boundaries. Silence stretched between us. Then, those are private family matters, and I am family, I said firmly. Or at least, I thought I was. Of course you are, he said, but his tone was clipped. Look, I'll talk to Vanessa and we'll figure something out. But bringing in financial advisors and making threats? I haven't made any threats, Andrew. I've simply stated facts and requested a meeting. After we hung up, I felt simultaneously drained and exhilarated. For years, I'd swallowed my feelings, made excuses for their behavior, and put their needs above my own. Simply standing my ground felt revolutionary. That afternoon, I received a text from Andrew. We can meet next Tuesday at 7 p.m., our house. I replied, Carson's office would be more appropriate, 3 p.m. Again, the three dots danced, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, fine. That weekend, the one I was supposedly too busy for babysitting, I did something I hadn't done in years. Drove to the coast, checked into a small bed and breakfast, and spent 2 days walking the beach, reading novels, and eating meals without rushing or being interrupted. I bought a watercolor set and attempted to paint the sunset, something I'd always wanted to try. My work was amateurish, but the joy it brought me was profound. I realized how long it had been since I'd done anything purely for myself, without calculating how it might benefit Andrew or fit into someone else's schedule. Sunday evening, as I packed to return home, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Martha, this is Richard Clark, Vanessa's father. My eyebrows shot up. In 7 years, Richard had never once called me directly. Hello, Richard. What can I do for you? It's about this situation with the house, he said, his voice smooth as polished marble. Andrew mentioned you're having some financial concerns. Did he? I kept my tone neutral. Yes, and I wanted to reach out directly, one parent to another. We all want what's best for the kids, don't we? The kids he referred to were Andrew and Vanessa, both in their 30s, both professionals, both fully grown adults. Of course, I said. I understand you put some money into their home purchase. Very generous of you. Perhaps we could discuss a way to resolve this matter privately, before Tuesday's meeting. I recognized the approach. Richard was used to making problems disappear with money and influence. I'd seen it at the wedding, at family gatherings, any time an inconvenience arose. I appreciate your call, Richard, but this is between Andrew, Vanessa, and me. We'll discuss it on Tuesday as planned. His tone cooled instantly. Martha, I'm trying to help here. These financial entanglements can get messy. Wouldn't you rather keep family harmony? The irony of his concern for family harmony now, when He'd never once intervened as I was gradually sidelined from my son's life. Was not lost on me. I agree completely, I said calmly. Family harmony is important. So is financial security. I look forward to finding a solution that addresses both on Tuesday. As I hung up, I realized something had fundamentally changed within me. For the first time in decades, I was putting myself first, not out of selfishness, but out of self-preservation. And it felt right. Tuesday's meeting would be difficult, possibly even devastating to my relationship with Andrew. But standing on the shore that weekend, watching waves erase and redraw the coastline hour by hour, I'd understood that some transformations are necessary, even when painful. The woman who had sold her home and emptied her savings without question was gone. The woman driving back to face her son and daughter-in-law was someone new, someone who valued herself enough to demand respect. Carson's office was sleek but welcoming. Modern furniture balanced with warm lighting and plants that softened the corporate feel. I arrived 15 minutes early, giving myself time to collect my thoughts. Carson greeted me with a reassuring smile and a cup of tea, chamomile with honey, just how I liked it. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his eyes kind behind his glasses. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my navy pantsuit, an outfit I'd purchased specifically for this meeting. I wanted to look professional, capable, someone to be taken seriously, not just a doting mother or convenient babysitter. At precisely 3:00 p.m., Andrew and Vanessa arrived. Andrew looked tired, shadows under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Vanessa was impeccably put together as always. Cream silk blouse, tailored slacks, not a hair out of place. But the tightness around her mouth betrayed her tension. Surprisingly, Richard Clark followed them into the office, his expensive cologne announcing his presence before he'd fully entered the room. "Hope you don't mind my joining," he said without waiting for a response. "Just here for moral support." Carson raised an eyebrow but merely gestured toward the additional chairs around the conference table. "Martha, would you like anyone else present for support on your side?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought to bring anyone. For most of my adult life, I'd handled difficult situations alone. "I'm fine, thank you," I said, though the 3-against-1 dynamic was suddenly very apparent. Carson nodded and began distributing folders with printouts detailing the property ownership, mortgage payments, and financial projections. "Thank you all for coming. We're here to discuss the financial arrangement regarding the property at 47 Oak Ridge Lane." "Before we begin," Richard interrupted, "I'd like to propose we keep this conversation informal. Family matters are always better resolved without all the paperwork." He gestured dismissively at the folders. Carson smiled blandly. "With respect, Mr. Clark, this is precisely the sort of matter that benefits from documentation. Martha has asked me to help facilitate a clear understanding of the current situation and explore options moving forward." Andrew shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, what exactly is this about? If you needed money, you could have just asked." The way he phrased it, as if I were coming to him for a handout rather than discussing funds I had already provided, made my jaw tighten. "This isn't about needing money, Andrew. It's about clarifying our arrangement regarding the house." Vanessa leaned forward, her voice measured. "Martha, we appreciate everything you've done to help us. But springing this meeting on us feels unnecessarily formal. We're family." There it was again. Family invoked when it served their purpose, forgotten when it didn't. Carson smoothly took control. "If I may, let me outline the current situation. 3 years ago, Martha provided $175,000 for the down payment on your home and became a co-owner with a 51% interest in the property. Additionally, she has been making half of the monthly mortgage payments, totaling approximately $65,000 to date." Richard whistled softly. "That's quite generous, Martha." "It was meant to be temporary," I said, finding my voice. until Andrew and Vanessa could refinance on their own. Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. And we will, once my design business is more established. We've been transparent about that timeline. Have you? Carson asked, flipping to a new page in his presentation. Because I don't see any formal agreement about when this refinancing would occur. No timeline, no benchmarks, no defined endpoints. Andrew's face flushed. We didn't think we needed legal documents between family members. Mom understood it was dependent on our financial situation improving. I took a deep breath. What I understood was that my retirement savings were being used for a temporary arrangement, not an open-ended subsidy of your lifestyle. Vanessa's eyes flashed. Subsidy? We're raising your grandchildren in that house. Would you rather we lived in some cramped apartment where you couldn't visit as easily? Of course not, I said. But there's a difference between helping family and being taken advantage of. The words hung in the air like thunder before lightning. Andrew's face went from flushed to pale. Taken advantage of? He repeated. Is that how you see us? After everything we've done for you? The room went silent. I waited for him to elaborate on what exactly they had done for me, but no explanation followed, because there wasn't one. Carson cleared his throat. Looking at Martha's financial projections, continuing the current arrangement is unsustainable. At this rate, she will deplete her savings within 5 years, leaving her financially vulnerable in her retirement. That can't be right, Andrew said, shaking his head. Mom's always been good with money. Yes, she has, Carson agreed. That's why she managed to accumulate enough to help with your down payment in the first place. But even the most carefully managed resources have limits. Richard leaned forward. All business now. What's the bottom line here? What are you asking for, Martha? I'm asking for resolution, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Either Andrew and Vanessa refinance immediately to remove me from the mortgage and establish a formal agreement to buy out my ownership percentage over time, or we need to discuss selling the property and dividing the proceeds according to ownership. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Selling our home? Vanessa's voice rose sharply. You can't be serious. We have children, Martha. This is their home, their stability. Andrew stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is insane. You're threatening to make your own grandchildren homeless because you're upset about a birthday dinner? I remained seated, keeping my voice level. This isn't about any one incident, Andrew. It's about recognizing that I've depleted my savings helping you, with no clear plan for my own future. And it's about acknowledging that our relationship has changed. I'm no longer welcome at family gatherings, but I'm still expected to provide financial support and free childcare. That's not fair, Vanessa said, her voice trembling with what sounded like practiced emotion. We've been busy, stressed with work and the kids. If we've been distant, it's not intentional. Richard, ever the businessman, cut through the emotion. What kind of numbers are we talking about for a buyout? Carson slid a document across the table. Based on current market value and Martha's 51% ownership, a fair figure would be approximately $325,000. This could be structured as installment. Payments over time, Vanessa gasped. That's outrageous. We don't have that kind of money. You've spent nearly that much on renovations, I pointed out quietly. The new kitchen, the landscaping, the master bathroom remodel. Andrew's face darkened. That's different. Those are investments in our property value. And what about my investment? I asked. Does that not count? Richard stepped in, his tone conciliatory. Obviously, we all want to find a solution that works for everyone. Martha, what if we set up a more modest payment plan? Something that acknowledges your contribution without putting undue strain on the kids? The kids are in their 30s, I said, and I've been subsidizing their lifestyle at the expense of my own security for decades. I'm not looking to punish anyone, but I am insisting on fairness. Andrew shook his head, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything we've been through as a family. The family dynamics aren't really the issue here, Carson interjected smoothly. This is a financial matter with emotional implications, not the other way around. Vanessa turned to me, her voice dropping to that confiding tone she used when trying to create a sense of alliance. Martha, let's step back from all this paperwork and legalities. Tell us what's really bothering you. Is it the birthday dinner? Because we can explain. What's bothering me, I said carefully, is that I've given everything I have, emotionally, financially, practically, to support this family. And in return, I've been gradually edged out of your lives, treated as an inconvenience, and left without consideration for my own future. Richard cleared his throat. Let's be reasonable here. Martha, no one's disputing your contributions. But this aggressive approach, lawyers, financial advisors, formal meetings, it's not how family should resolve differences. I looked directly at him. And how should family resolve differences? Richard? By slowly freezing out the inconvenient members? By taking their financial support while excluding them from celebrations? By teaching children to dismiss their grandmother's value? The room went silent again. Andrew and Vanessa exchanged glances, communicating in that silent language married couples develop. Finally, Andrew spoke. Mom, if you're feeling unappreciated, we can work on that. We can make more effort with Sunday dinners, include you more. But this financial ultimatum feels like extortion. The word hit me like a slap. Extortion. As if asking for what was legally mine, what I had earned, and saved and sacrificed for, was some kind of criminal act. It's not extortion to ask for clarity about my own financial future, I said, my voice tight. It's not extortion to expect the agreement we made to be honored. And it's not extortion to want to be treated with basic respect and consideration. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. We do respect you, Martha. We're grateful for everything you've done. Gratitude isn't just words, I said. It's actions. And your actions have consistently shown that while my money and my time are welcome, I am not. Richard straightened his tie, shifting to what I recognized as his negotiation posture. Perhaps we need to table this discussion and revisit it when emotions aren't running so high. Martha, I understand you're upset, but threatening to force the sale of a family home is extreme. I'm not threatening anything, I said. I'm stating my position and asking for resolution. Carson intervened before Richard could respond. I think we've outlined the situation clearly today. Martha has presented two reasonable options, either a structured buyout of her ownership share or the sale of the property and division of proceeds. I suggest you take some time to consider these options and we can reconvene next week. Andrew stood up again, gathering his things. This isn't over, Mom. If you think you can bully us like this, you're wrong. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, loved, sacrificed for, and barely recognized him. This isn't bullying, Andrew. This is finally standing up for myself after years of putting everyone else first. As they left the office, Vanessa turned back, her voice low and cutting. I always told Andrew you were manipulative, using money to control him, to control us. This just proves it. The door closed behind them with a decisive click, leaving me, alone with Carson in the sudden silence. Well, he said after a moment, that went about as expected. I nodded, too drained to speak. The meeting had confirmed what I'd suspected. They saw my financial contributions not as generous sacrifices, but as obligations. My requests for fairness were viewed as a tax, my desire for respect as manipulation. What happens now? I asked, finally. Carson gathered the untouched folders they had left behind. Now we wait. They'll be angry, then they'll calculate their options, then they'll come back with a counteroffer. This is just the opening round, Martha. It doesn't feel like a negotiation, I said softly. It feels like losing my son. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. The relationship you had was already changing. You're just finally acknowledging it and refusing to be taken advantage of in the process. That takes courage. As I drove home, I wondered if courage was supposed to feel this hollow. The look in Andrew's eyes, as if I had betrayed him rather than supported him for decades, replayed in my mind. But alongside the pain was something new. A quiet certainty that I was finally doing the right thing. Not just for my financial future, but for my sense of self-worth. For the first time in decades, I had drawn a line in the sand and refused to let it be erased. That night, I sat on my small porch with a glass of wine, watching fireflies blink in the gathering dusk. My phone remained silent. No texts from Andrew, no calls from Vanessa asking for babysitting or errands, no demands disguised as requests. The silence should have felt lonely, but instead, it felt like the first breath after being underwater too long. Like the beginning of something new. 3 days passed without a word from Andrew or Vanessa. The silence was both painful and peaceful. No demands, no guilt trips, but also no grandchildren's laughter, no family connection. I found myself checking my phone constantly, then forcing myself to put it away. On the 4th day, I received a text from Emma's soccer coach, Linda, whom I'd gotten to know from attending games when Andrew and Vanessa were too busy. "Emma's asking for you at practice. Everything okay?" My heart clenched. In their anger at me, had they forbidden Emma from mentioning me? Was my granddaughter confused about my sudden absence? I texted back, "Just some family scheduling issues. Please tell her grandma misses her and I'm thinking of her." Linda's response came quickly. "Will do. Tournament this Saturday if you want to come. 10 a.m. at Riverdale Field." I stared at the message, conflicted. Would my presence cause more drama? Would Andrew and Vanessa make a scene if I showed up? But the thought of missing Emma's tournament, her first as team captain, was unbearable. "I'll be there," I wrote back before I could second-guess myself. Later that afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Natalie Cooper, my neighbor, from 3 houses down, holding a flat tire repair kit. "Martha, thank goodness you're home. My tire's flat, and I have no idea what I'm doing with this kit. The YouTube tutorial makes it look so easy, but..." She trailed off, noticing my expression. "Is this a bad time?" Natalie was in her 60s, a retired nurse with a perpetually sunny disposition. We weren't close friends, but we'd shared coffee on occasion and watched each other's houses during vacations. "Not at all," I said, forcing a smile. "Let me grab my jacket." As we walked to her driveway, Natalie chatted about neighborhood gossip and her daughter's new baby. The normalcy of the conversation was a welcome distraction from the turmoil of my family situation. Kneeling beside her car, I located the puncture in her tire, a small nail, and began working with the repair kit. The physical task was oddly satisfying, requiring just enough concentration to quiet my racing thoughts. "You're good at this," Natalie observed. "Where'd you learn to fix tires?" "Thomas taught me," I said, working the rubber plug into the puncture. "He believed everyone should know basic car maintenance. Said you never know when you'll need it." "Smart man," she nodded. "I should have learned ages ago instead of always calling AIA." As I finished sealing the puncture, Natalie leaned against her car. "Speaking of help, I've been meaning to ask you something. My book club needs a new member. Our accountant, Diane, moved to Florida. We meet every other Thursday. Lots of wine. Some books, mostly laughs. Would you be interested?" The invitation caught me off guard. For years, my schedule had revolved around Andrew's family's needs. Babysitting, Sunday dinners, school events. I'd let my own social connections wither, always available at a moment's notice for grandparent duties. I'd like that," I said, surprised by the emotion welling in my throat. "Wonderful," Natalie beamed. "Next meeting is at my place, this Thursday at 7. We're discussing The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. No pressure to finish it. Half of us never do." She winked. That simple interaction, fixing a tire, accepting a book club invitation, felt like a small but significant reclamation of my life. For so long, I'd been defined by my role as Andrew's mother and Emma and Tyler's grandmother. The possibility of being just Martha, a neighbor, a book club member, a woman with her own interests, was both terrifying and thrilling. The next morning, Carson called. "Martha, I've heard from Andrew's attorney." My stomach dropped. Attorney? They've hired an attorney? A real estate lawyer named James Witherspoon. Apparently, Richard Clark recommended him. Of course, Richard would escalate this to legal representation. Everything was a power play to him. "What does he say?" I asked, bracing myself. "They're proposing a structured buyout of your ownership share, but with some conditions. They're offering $175,000, the amount of your original down payment, paid in monthly installments over 10 years with no interest." I did the quick math. That's about $1,450 a month. And it completely ignores the increased value of the property over the past 3 years, plus the mortgage payments I've been making. "Precisely," Carson agreed. "It's a lowball offer, designed to appear reasonable on the surface, but actually significantly undervalues your position. They're also requesting that during the payment period, you waive any ownership rights and have your name removed from the deed immediately. So they get full ownership now, and I get paid a fraction of what I'm owed over a decade?" I shook my head. "That's not acceptable." "I didn't think it would be," Carson said. "I've already drafted a counteroffer, $325,000 to reflect your 51% of the current market value, paid over 5 years with 3% interest, and your name remains on the deed until the final payment is made. And if they refuse, then we proceed with the partition action to force a sale," he said. "But I suspect they'll counter again. This is just the opening volley." After hanging up, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. They were taking me seriously now, seriously enough to hire an attorney, but it had required a legal threat to earn that respect. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear, perfect weather for Emma's soccer tournament. I arrived early, finding a spot on the bleachers where I could see the field but wasn't front and center. I hadn't told Andrew or Vanessa I was coming, unsure of how they would react. As Emma's team took the field for warm-ups, I spotted her immediately, her blonde ponytail bouncing as she ran drills with her teammates. She looked so focused, so much older than her 8 years, wearing the captain's armband with obvious pride. Then I saw Andrew and Vanessa arrive, Tyler in tow. They settled on the opposite side of the field, Vanessa arranging a blanket while Andrew unpacked snacks from a cooler. Neither had spotted me yet. The game began, and Emma was magnificent, confident, quick, directing her teammates with natural leadership. When she scored the first goal, I had to restrain myself from cheering too loudly. I didn't want to draw attention yet, didn't want to create a scene that would distract from Emma's moment. At halftime, with Emma's team up 2-0, I watched her jog to the sidelines for water and a team huddle. As the players dispersed briefly before the second half, Emma scanned the crowd, her eyes eventually finding mine. Her face lit up in a way that made my heart swell, and she waved enthusiastically. Waved back smiling and blew her a kiss. That's when Andrew turned, following his daughter's gaze, and spotted me. Even from a distance, I could see his posture stiffen. He said something to Vanessa, who looked up sharply. I braced myself, half expecting them to march over and confront me. Instead, after a moment of visible deliberation, Andrew simply nodded in my direction. A curt acknowledgement, but not a rejection. Vanessa didn't acknowledge me at all, turning back to adjust Tyler's hat with exaggerated attention. The second half of the game was just as exciting, with Emma scoring another goal and her team winning 3-1. As the players celebrated, parents streamed onto the field to congratulate them. I held back, not wanting to intrude on Andrew and Vanessa's family moment. But then Emma broke away from her teammates and ran directly toward me, launching herself into my arms with such force I nearly fell backward off the bleacher. "Grandma, you came. Did you see my goals? Coach says I'm getting really good at corner kicks." Her words tumbled out in excited bursts, her small body vibrating with post-game energy. "I saw everything, sweetheart. You were amazing," I said, hugging her tightly. "I'm so proud of you. Are you coming to the pizza party? Coach is treating the whole team at Milo's." Before I could answer, Andrew appeared, his expression guarded. "Emma, we need to go. Team photo in 5 minutes." Emma clung to my hand. "Is Grandma coming to Milo's with us?" Andrew and I locked eyes over Emma's head. In that moment, all the hurt and anger between us seemed to hover in the space between us, visible and raw. "Your grandmother probably has other plans," he said carefully. Emma's face fell. "But it's a celebration, and Grandma always comes to celebrations." "Not always," Vanessa said, appearing with Tyler. Her tone was light but pointed. "Sometimes people have other priorities." I felt my chest tighten at the deliberate jab, the subtle way she was turning my absence, an absence they had engineered, into abandonment in Emma's eyes. "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I'd love to come if that's okay with your parents." Emma looked up at Andrew with pleading eyes. "Please, Dad. Please, can Grandma come?" Andrew hesitated, glancing at Vanessa, who gave an almost imperceptible shrug. "Fine," he said finally. "Team photo now, Emma. We'll see you at Milo's. Mom." As they walked away, Emma turned back to give me one more wave, her smile radiant. That smile was my first victory, small perhaps in the grand scheme of things, but monumental to my heart. Despite everything, despite whatever Andrew and Vanessa might have said to her, Emma still loved me, still wanted me present in her life. At Milo's Pizza, I kept a respectful distance, sitting with some of the other parents while Andrew and Vanessa sat with Emma and Tyler at the team table. Linda, the coach, stopped by my seat. "Glad you could make it," she said. "Emma was worried you wouldn't be here. Said she hadn't seen you in weeks." "Family scheduling issues." I repeated my earlier explanation, not wanting to burden a relative. "Stranger with the complicated truth." Linda nodded knowingly. "Well, whatever's going on, I'm glad you're here today. That kid lights up when you're around. Some grandparents show up out of obligation, but you actually see her, you know?" Her words warmed me, validating what I'd always felt, that my relationship with my grandchildren was genuine and meaningful, not just an extension of my relationship with their parents. As the celebration wound down, I prepared to leave, not wanting to overstay the fragile welcome I'd been granted. Emma ran over to hug me goodbye. "Will you come to my science fair next Friday?" she asked. "I did a project on bird migration. You helped me pick the topic, remember?" I glanced over at Andrew, who was watching our interaction closely. "If your parents say it's okay, I would love to." "Dad?" Emma called out. "Can Grandma come to my science fair?" Put on the spot in front of teammates and other parents, Andrew had little choice. "Sure, it's at 6:30 in the school gymnasium." "I'll be there," I promised Emma, hugging her once more before leaving. As I walked to my car, I heard footsteps behind me. Turning, I was surprised to see Tyler running toward me, Vanessa following at a distance with an expression of controlled displeasure. "Grandma," he called, wrapping his arms around my legs. "I drawed you a picture. Mom says I couldn't give it to you inside 'cause you were busy." He thrust a crumpled paper into my hands, a crayon drawing of what appeared to be a soccer field, with stick figures, one labeled Emma and another larger one with gray hair labeled Grandma. "It's beautiful, Tyler. Thank you," I said, kneeling to his level. "I'll put it on my refrigerator as soon as I get home." Vanessa reached us, her smile tight. "Tyler, we need to go. Dad's waiting." As she took his hand, she finally addressed me directly. "This doesn't change anything, Martha. Andrew's talking to our attorney on Monday." I nodded, refusing to let her dampen this small moment of connection. I understand. See you at the science fair. Driving home, I smoothed out Tyler's drawing on the passenger seat, feeling a curious blend of sadness and hope. The legal battle over the house would continue, but today had shown me something important. My relationship with my grandchildren existed independently of the conflict with their parents. Emma and Tyler still loved me, still wanted me in their lives, and that was a foundation I could build on, no matter what happened with the mortgage dispute. Some things, I realized, were worth more than houses or money or even pride. The love of my grandchildren was one of them. But so was my self-respect. And for the first time in years, I felt like I might be able to have both. The week following Emma's soccer tournament brought a flurry of legal communications. Carson forwarded me emails from James Witherspoon, Andrew and Vanessa's attorney, each one more strongly worded than the last. They rejected our counteroffer of $325,000 over 5 years as excessive and punitive, instead proposing $200,000 over 7 years with a 1% interest rate. They're still lowballing, Carson said during our phone call. But they've moved up from their initial offer. It shows they're taking this seriously. What do you recommend? I asked, staring at the documentation spread across my kitchen table. We hold firm on the amount. It's a fair valuation of your ownership percentage, but we could extend the payment period to 7 years to ease their monthly burden. The key is to keep your name on the deed until they've paid at least 50% of the total. I agreed, and Carson drafted our response. The back and forth continued, a bloodless negotiation over the physical manifestation of what had once been a loving relationship. Each email, each counteroffer, seemed to widen the gulf between Andrew and me. Meanwhile, life went on. I attended Natalie's book club that Thursday, surprising myself by how much I enjoyed the discussion and the company of women my own age with their own lives, interests, and perspectives. We talked about the novel, yes, but also about retirement planning, adult children, travel aspirations, and the challenges of aging. No one expected me to babysit, cook, or make financial sacrifices. I was just Martha, a peer, a friend, a woman with thoughts and experiences worth sharing. Same time in 2 weeks at Elaine's house, Natalie reminded everyone as we were leaving. Martha, we rotate hosting duties, but you're off the hook until you've been with us a few months. I'd be happy to host sooner, I offered, already mentally, rearranging my small living room to accommodate the group. We'll put you on the schedule for next month then, Natalie smiled. Fair warning, Barbara always brings her terrible homemade wine, and we all pretend to like it. The casual camaraderie, the inside jokes, the sense of belonging to something outside my family identity. It was like oxygen to someone who'd been holding her breath for years. Friday evening arrived, and with it, Emma's science fair. I dressed, carefully in a blue blouse that Emma had once told me brought out my eyes, and arrived at the school gymnasium 20 minutes early. The large space was transformed with rows of trifold display boards, nervous students making last-minute adjustments, and parents milling about with proud expressions. I scanned the room for Emma's project, finally spotting her in the 3rd row, arranging paper birds around her display board titled, The Amazing Journey, How Birds Navigate Migration. I approached cautiously, unsure of the protocol after the tentative truce at the soccer game. Hello, Emma. Your display looks wonderful. She turned, her face lighting up. Grandma, you came. She threw her arms around me, then pulled back to tug at my hand. Come see what I did. I used the bird book you gave me for all the facts. Her project was impressive. Detailed illustrations of migration routes, facts about different bird species, even a small model showing how birds use the Earth's magnetic field for navigation. More touching to me was the acknowledgement at the bottom of her display. Special thanks to my grandma Martha, who taught me to love birds and science. My eyes welled with tears at the simple recognition. Oh, Emma, this is amazing. You've done Such a good job. She certainly has, came Andrew's voice from behind us. He stood with Vanessa and Tyler, all dressed up for the occasion. Tyler immediately ran to me for a hug, while Andrew and Vanessa kept a polite distance. The judges are coming around soon, Vanessa said to Emma. Remember to stand up straight and speak clearly. Emma nodded seriously, then turned to me. Will you stay while I present, Grandma? Before I could answer, a bell rang, and the school principal announced that judging would begin. Parents were asked to step back from the displays to allow the judges to interact directly with the students. Andrew, Vanessa, Tyler, and I moved to the sidelines, creating an awkward family grouping. The tension was palpable, with Vanessa checking her phone and Andrew focusing intently on Emma's display across the room. Tyler broke the silence. Daddy, I'm hungry. They'll have refreshments after the judging, Andrew replied, ruffling his son's hair. But I'm hungry now, Tyler insisted, his voice rising in that way that signaled an imminent meltdown. I instinctively reached into my purse where I always kept a small container of crackers for just such emergencies. Would you like some crackers? Tyler? Vanessa's head snapped up from her phone. He doesn't need snacks. He'll spoil his dinner. It's just a few crackers, I said, keeping my voice light. They're the whole grain ones he likes. I said no. Vanessa's tone was sharp. We have our own snacks in the car if necessary. We don't need you undermining our parenting decisions. The disproportionate response to such a minor issue stunned me into silence. Over crackers? Really? Andrew cleared his throat uncomfortably. Vanessa, maybe, don't start, Andrew, she cut him off. We've talked about this. Consistent boundaries. Tyler looked between us, confused by the sudden tension. But I like Grandma's crackers. Tyler, enough, Vanessa said firmly. Go sit on that bench over there where we can see you. You can have a snack after the judging. As Tyler trudged away, visibly disappointed, I felt a familiar pang. The helplessness of having my role as a grandmother diminished, my simple offers of care rejected as interference. I should check on Emma, Andrew said, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He walked away, leaving Vanessa and me in charged silence. After a few moments, Vanessa spoke. Our attorney says you're being unreasonable about the house. I met her gaze steadily. And my financial advisor says I'm being more than fair. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Andrew? To our family? Her voice was low, intense. He's not sleeping. He's distracted at work, all because his own mother is threatening to make his children homeless. That's not what's happening, and you know it, I replied. I'm asking for a fair resolution to a financial arrangement that's been one-sided for too long. It's always been about money with you, hasn't it? She said, her eyes cold. The way Andrew tells it, you've held financial support over his head his entire life. The unfairness of the accusation stung like a physical blow. I had worked multiple jobs to put Andrew through college without debt. I had depleted my savings to help them buy their dream home. I had made mortgage payments that should have been their responsibility. I wonder, I said quietly, what version of history Andrew has told you? Because in the version I lived, I gave everything I had to make sure he never went without, even when that meant I did. Vanessa's expression didn't soften. Well, your manipulation tactics won't work anymore. Richard has connections with every bank in the county. If you force a sale, we'll refinance through his channels, buy the house ourselves at auction, and you'll never see Emma or Tyler again. Is that what you want? The naked threat hung between us like a blade. Before I could respond, another bell rang, signaling the end of the judging period. Parents and families were invited to return to the displays. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. What I want, Vanessa, is to be treated with respect, both financially and personally. And I want a relationship with my grandchildren that doesn't depend on me sacrificing my own security. I walked away then, moving toward Emma's display where she was animatedly talking to one of the judges. I wouldn't let Vanessa see how deeply her threat had rattled me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced pleasantries and tense silences. Emma won an honorable mention for her project, beaming with pride as she was called to the front to receive her certificate. I clapped until my hands hurt, my heart full despite the undercurrent of conflict with her parents. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged me tightly. "Will you come to my piano recital next month, Grandma? I'm playing the piece you used to play. For me." I glanced at Andrew and Vanessa, who were gathering their things nearby. "I'd love to, sweetheart. We'll see if we can work it out." As I walked to my car alone, my phone chimed with a text from Carson. Andrew's attorney reached out. "They want a meeting without lawyers present. Just you, Andrew, and Vanessa. Monday at noon. Thoughts?" I stared at the message, conflicted. A meeting without attorneys could be an olive branch, a sign they were ready to handle this as family, rather than adversaries. Or it could be a trap, a way to pressure me emotionally without the professional buffer Carson provided. "What's your advice?" I texted back. "Could go either way," came his prompt response. "But if you agree, we should document terms of any agreement immediately after. No handshake deals." I made my decision. Tell them I'll be there, but the meeting happens at a neutral location. Not their house or my house. Monday's meeting was set for noon at Westview Park, at one of the picnic tables near the duck pond where I used to take Andrew as a child. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Returning to a place of simple happiness from his childhood to discuss the fractured relationship of our adulthood. I arrived early, choosing a table with good sightlines to the parking area. The spring day was perfect. Warm sunshine, a light breeze, flowering trees dotting the landscape with bursts of pink and white. In another context, it would have been a lovely day for a family outing. Andrew arrived first, alone, which surprised me. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets, looking more like the uncertain teenager he'd once been than the confident professional he'd become. "Mom," he said as a greeting, sitting across from me. "Where's Vanessa?" I asked, glancing toward the parking lot. "She's not coming. This is between you and me." He took a deep breath. "It always has been." Something in his tone made me wary. "What do you mean?" He looked directly at me, his expression unreadable. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About being taken advantage of, about putting everyone else first for decades. And I realized something." I waited, holding my breath. "You're right," he said simply. "You have always put me first, sometimes at your own expense, and somewhere along the way, I started to expect it, to take it for granted." The admission, so unexpected, left me momentarily speechless. "But," he continued, his tone hardening slightly, "that doesn't change our current situation. The house is our home, Emma and Tyler's home, and your actions now threaten that stability. Andrew, I'm not trying to make you lose your home. I'm trying to ensure I don't lose everything I've worked for." He nodded slowly. "I understand that better now. Which is why I have a proposal, one that doesn't come from lawyers or financial advisors, just from me, your son." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope, sliding it across the table. "Open it." Inside was a handwritten letter and a cashier's check for $50,000. "This is everything Vanessa and I have in savings," he said as I stared at the check. "It's not the full amount you deserve, but it's a start, a good faith payment. The letter outlines our commitment to pay you $20,500 monthly until we've reached the full $325,000 you're asking for." I looked up from the letter, confused by this sudden capitulation. Why the change of heart? Andrew's expression was complicated, a mixture of resignation, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Because I don't want to fight anymore. Because despite everything, you're still my mother. And because I need to set things right." A weight I'd been carrying for weeks began to lift. Andrew, there's one condition, he interrupted. One thing we need from you in return. And just like that, the weight settled back onto my shoulders. What condition? We need you to sign a document stating that upon receipt of the first payment, you'll remove your name from the deed and mortgage. Richard has arranged for the refinancing, but we need clean title. The request confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't a genuine acknowledgement of my position. It was a strategic maneuver, one that would leave me with no legal claim to the property, but only a promise of future payments. And if I don't agree? I asked, already knowing the answer. Andrew's face hardened. Then we proceed legally. Our attorney believes we have grounds to challenge the original ownership structure as coercive. It would be messy, expensive, and would permanently damage whatever relationship we still have. There it was, the threat beneath the olive branch, the ultimatum disguised as reconciliation. I need time to think about this, I said, carefully returning the letter and check to the envelope, and to discuss it with Carson. Andrew's expression darkened. This offer is just between us, Mom. No lawyers, no financial advisors. If you can't make this decision on your own, then maybe Vanessa is right about you using money to control me. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost laughable. Andrew, asking for professional advice isn't about control. It's about making informed decisions. He stood up abruptly. The offer expires at the end of the day. You either trust me as your son or you don't. As he walked away, his shoulders rigid with tension, I remained at the picnic table, the envelope, heavy in my hands. The choice before me wasn't really about money or property at all. It was about whether I would continue the pattern of sacrificing my security for emotional approval, or finally stand firm in valuing myself. I knew what I had to do, even as my heart broke at the knowledge of what it would cost. I sat at that picnic table long after Andrew left, the envelope with his check and letter lying before me like a test I wasn't sure how to pass. Families strolled by, children fed the ducks. Life continued all around me while I remained frozen in my moment of decision. My phone buzzed. A text from Carson. How did the meeting go? I responded simply, need to talk. Can I come to your office? 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Carson, recounting Andrew's offer and ultimatum. His expression grew increasingly troubled. As I explained the condition, removing my name from the deed immediately in exchange for a promise of future payments. Martha, he said when I finished, I have to be absolutely clear about this. If you accept those terms, you would have no legal recourse if they stopped paying. You'd be relying entirely on good faith. I know, I said quietly. But he's my son. Should I really be treating him like someone who can't be trusted? Carson removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. This isn't about trust in the abstract. It's about the pattern of behavior they've already demonstrated. They excluded you from family events. They made promises about refinancing that were never kept. They attempted to manipulate you emotionally when you raised legitimate financial concerns. Put that way, the decision seemed clearer. But still, my heart resisted. What would happen, I asked, if I countered? If I said I'd accept the payment schedule but wanted to keep my name on the deed until, say, half the amount was paid? You could try, Carson said. But based on the ultimatum, I suspect they'd reject any counteroffer. The very purpose of this maneuver appears to be removing your legal claim to the property as quickly as possible. Why the urgency, though? I wondered aloud. If they truly intend to pay as promised? Carson's expression grew even more serious. That's what concerns me. The sudden change in approach, the cash payment, the pressure to decide immediately without consulting me. It suggests they may have something planned that would be complicated by your continued legal interest in the property. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What kind of something? I don't know, he admitted. But Richard Clark's involvement raises flags. You mentioned he has banking connections. There could be refinancing plans, equity lines of credit, perhaps even a quick sale after your name is removed. The possibility that I was being manipulated into surrendering my legal rights so they could exploit the property value sent a wave of hurt through me. Was Andrew really capable of such calculated deception? "What do you think I should do?" I asked, my voice small. Carson leaned forward. "I can't make this decision for you, Martha. But I can tell you that in my professional experience, anyone who pressures you to act quickly without seeking advice rarely has your best interests at heart." I nodded, the truth of his words resonating painfully. "Thank you, Carson. I know what I need to do." That evening, as the sun began to set, I typed a message to Andrew. "I've considered your offer carefully. I appreciate the down payment and commitment to monthly payments. However, I cannot agree to remove my name from the deed until at least half the total amount is paid. This protects us both and ensures the agreement is fulfilled. I hope you understand this isn't about trust, but about responsible financial management." His response came almost immediately. "That's your final answer?" "Yes," I replied. "I believe it's a fair compromise." 3 dots disappeared. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Our attorney will be in touch." The finality of his response hit me like a physical blow. In choosing to protect myself financially, I had potentially damaged my relationship with my son beyond repair. But what was the alternative? Continuing a pattern of self-sacrifice that had already left me financially vulnerable and emotionally drained? As I set my phone down, I was surprised to find that alongside the grief was something unexpected: relief. The constant anxiety of walking on eggshells, of never knowing where I stood, of questioning my worth in my own family. It had become a burden so familiar I'd stopped noticing its weight until it was partially lifted. The next morning, I woke to an email from James Witherspoon, Andrew and Vanessa's attorney. The language was formal, aggressive, and left no doubt that they intended to fight my claim to the property through any means necessary. They were alleging that I had exerted undue influence in the original agreement, that I had misrepresented my intentions regarding the ownership structure, and that I had engaged in emotionally manipulative tactics to secure a majority stake in their family home. I forwarded the email to Carson, who called me immediately. "This is exactly what I was concerned about," he said. "They're trying to intimidate you into accepting their terms." "Will these allegations hold up legally?" I asked, my stomach churning. "They're on shaky ground," he assured me. "We have documentation of every step of the process, including the real estate attorney's notes confirming that Andrew and Vanessa were fully informed of the ownership structure at closing. But defending against these allegations will be stressful and potentially expensive." "So, what do we do?" "We proceed with the partition action," he said firmly. "They've shown their hand now. They never intended to negotiate in good faith. The legal system exists precisely for situations like this, where verbal agreements and promises have failed." That afternoon, Carson filed the necessary paperwork to initiate the process that could ultimately force the sale of the colonial house. It wasn't the outcome I had wanted, far from it, but it seemed to be the only path forward that respected my own needs and rights. Word of the legal action spread quickly. By evening, I received a scathing text from Richard Clark. "You've made a serious mistake, Martha. This won't end well for you." I didn't respond, but his message lingered, its threatening tone reinforcing my growing certainty that I'd made the right decision. If they were willing to resort to intimidation tactics, what else might they have done if I'd surrendered my legal claim to the property? The next day brought no communication from Andrew or Vanessa, but around noon, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, I was stunned to find Judith Clark, Vanessa's mother, standing on my porch. In all the years Vanessa and Andrew had been together, Judith had been a distant figure, attending family events with cool politeness but never seeking my company. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking the usual imperious tone I associated with her. Warily, I stepped aside to let her enter. She looked around my modest home with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not the disdain I might have expected, but something more complex. "I apologize for coming unannounced," she said, taking the seat I offered in my small living room. "But I felt I needed to speak with you directly." "About the house," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," she nodded. "And about my daughter and your son." I waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. Judith smoothed her perfectly tailored slacks and took a breath. "Richard doesn't know I'm here. He wouldn't approve. But I felt you deserved to know the full situation." My wariness increased. "What situation?" "Vanessa and Andrew are in serious financial trouble," she said bluntly. "Far more serious than I believe you realize." This was unexpected. Despite their complaints about not being able to afford buying me out, I'd always assumed they were financially stable. Andrew had a good teaching position, and Vanessa's design business seemed to be growing. "What kind of trouble?" I asked. "Vanessa has been less than prudent with their finances," Judith said, choosing her words carefully. "The renovations on the house were significantly more expensive than they let on. And there have been other expenditures, trips, clothing, memberships at clubs they can't really afford, all funded through credit cards and home equity lines." I was stunned. "But Andrew is usually so careful with money. I taught him." "Andrew doesn't know the full extent of it," Judith interrupted. "Vanessa has been managing their finances and, frankly, hiding much of the debt from him. Richard and I have bailed them out twice already, but we've reached our limit." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, though I was beginning to see where this was heading. Judith met my eyes directly. "Because their plan, Richard's plan really, is to have you removed from the deed, refinance the house for its full current value, and use that money to clear their debts. Once that happens, there would be no equity left to make payments to you. You would never see the money they promised." The calculated deception took my breath away. Not just Andrew and Vanessa, but Richard too, had been planning to effectively steal my investment in the house. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" I asked, still processing the magnitude of what she was suggesting. Judith reached into her handbag and withdrew a folder. "Because I brought proof, bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications, copies of everything. I made these without Richard's knowledge." As I paged through the documents, the picture became horrifyingly clear. Andrew and Vanessa were over $200,000 in debt beyond the mortgage. They'd been living far beyond their means for years, using credit cards, personal loans, and home equity to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford. "Why are you doing this?" I asked Judith. "Why betray your husband and daughter's confidence? This way?" She looked away, her perfectly maintained exterior cracking slightly. "Because I was you once. My first husband left me with nothing while I was still raising our son from my previous marriage. Richard swooped in as my savior, but there were conditions. Financial control was one of them. I had never known this about Judith, that she had been married before, that she had experienced vulnerability similar to mine. Richard taught Vanessa that appearances matter above all else," she continued. "That financial tactics and leveraging connections are how you get ahead. I didn't intervene enough, and now I see her making choices that will eventually harm her, Andrew, and those children." She stood to leave, straightening her jacket with a return to her usual composure. "Do what you need to do with this information. Martha, but please don't tell them it came from me. Despite everything, they're still my family." After she left, I sat surrounded by the damning financial documents, feeling physically ill. The betrayal cut deep. Not just the financial deception, but the realization that my own son had been willing to participate in a scheme to defraud me of my life savings. With shaking hands, I called Carson. "I need you to come over," I said. "There's something you need to see." Within an hour, Carson was at my kitchen table, methodically reviewing the documents Judith had provided. "This changes everything," he said finally, looking up at me. "If they're planning what these documents suggest, it constitutes potential fraud. Your legal position is even stronger now." "What do I do?" I asked. "First, we secure these documents properly. Then we accelerate the partition action. With this evidence, we can request an emergency injunction preventing any refinancing or additional liens against the property while our case is proceeding." As Carson gathered the papers, he paused. "Martha, I have to ask, knowing what you know now, what do you want the outcome to be? Do you still want to find a compromise, or do you want to proceed with forcing the sale?" It was the question I'd been asking myself since Judith walked out my door. Despite everything, some part of me still wanted to protect Andrew, to find a solution that wouldn't leave him homeless or financially ruined. He was still my son, even if he had betrayed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. But I also knew that continuing to shield him from the consequences of his choices, and Vanessa's, wasn't truly helping him. It was enabling patterns that would eventually destroy them anyway. "I want what's fair," I said finally. "I want to protect my financial interest in the property, but I also want to give them a chance to make this right, if they're willing to. Be honest about their situation and work toward a real solution." Carson nodded. "Then I suggest we proceed with the legal action, but simultaneously present them with one final opportunity for honest negotiation. If they come clean about their financial situation and agree to a structured resolution that protects your interests, perhaps we can avoid the most damaging outcomes. And if they don't," I asked, already suspecting the answer, "then the court will likely order the sale of the property, with proceeds divided according to ownership percentages. They'll need to find somewhere else to live, and you'll receive your share of the equity." The weight of that potential outcome settled heavily on my shoulders. I wasn't naive enough to believe that forcing the sale of their home would leave any chance for reconciliation with Andrew. It would likely mean the end of our relationship, perhaps permanently. But sometimes, I was beginning to understand, loving someone means letting them face the reality of their choices rather than continuing to shield them at your own expense. "Send the letter," I said quietly. "One last chance for honesty and a fair resolution." As Carson left with the documents, I stood at my kitchen window, watching the spring rain begin to fall. The watershed moment had arrived, not just in the legal proceedings, but in my relationship with my son. Whatever happened next would irrevocably change our family's future, and for the first time, I was prepared to accept that future. Whatever it might hold, Carson's letter was delivered to Andrew and Vanessa by courier the following morning. A formal, detailed document outlining the evidence of their financial deception, the planned fraud regarding the house refinancing, and one final offer to resolve the situation through honest negotiation. I spent that day in a state of nervous anticipation, jumping every time my phone rang or a notification appeared. But by evening, there had been no response. The silence was both deafening and telling. Then, just as I was preparing for bed, my doorbell rang. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to find Andrew standing alone on my porch, his face drawn and pale in the porch light. Opened the door but remained in the doorway, unsure of his intentions. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Please, Mom." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. He walked to my living room and stood awkwardly, looking around, as if seeing it for the first time. "Vanessa doesn't know I'm here," he said finally. "I told her I was going for a drive to clear my head." "I see," I said, remaining standing rather than inviting him to sit. "Have you read the letter from Carson?" He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "Yes, and I know about the documents Judith provided." "So it's true then?" I asked, needing to hear it from him directly. You were planning to remove me from the deed and refinance the house without paying what you promised? Andrew's eyes finally met mine, and what I saw there was a mixture of shame and resignation. It wasn't my idea, he said quietly. But yes, that was the plan Richard developed. And you went along with it, I said, not a question, but a statement of fact. He sank onto my sofa, head in his hands. I didn't know what else to do, Mom. We're drowning in debt. Vanessa kept spending, taking out more credit cards, hiding their eye. Statements from me. By the time I figured out how bad it was, we were in so deep there seemed no way out. So, you decided to solve your problems by stealing from me, I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the pain behind the words. I told myself it wasn't stealing, he admitted. I told myself you owed me this, that after everything you'd put me through growing up, this was just balancing the scales. The statement struck me like a physical blow. What I put you through. Andrew, I worked 3 jobs to put you through college. I went without so you could have opportunities. What exactly did I put you through? His expression changed, a flash of the resentment I'd glimpsed over the years. You made me the center of your life after Dad died. Every decision, every sacrifice, it was all about me, and you never let me forget it. The weight of your expectations, your sacrifices. It was suffocating. I stood in stunned silence, trying to process his words. Had my love, my dedication, my prioritization of his needs actually damaged him in ways I hadn't recognized? I never meant to burden you, I said finally. I was trying to give you everything I could. I know, he said, his voice softer. I know that now. But for years, I resented it. Resented feeling like I owed you a certain kind of life, a certain level of success, to justify all you'd given up. The realization dawned slowly, painfully, in my determination to give Andrew everything, to never let him feel the absence of his father. I'd inadvertently placed expectations on him that had festered into resentment. And that resentment had made him vulnerable to influences like Vanessa and Richard, who offered a path to an identity separate from his obligations to me. When I met Vanessa, Andrew continued, she showed me a different world, one where people took what they wanted unapologetically. Richard taught me about leverage, about using connections and financial strategies to get ahead. It felt liberating. Like I could finally stop being the grateful, dutiful son and just live. I sat down across from him, the distance between us filled with years of unspoken feelings and misunderstandings. And now? I asked. Where does this leave us? Andrew looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I don't know. The house is underwater with equity lines. Vanessa maxed out our credit cards. We're behind on property taxes. Even if we sold it now, after paying off all the debt, there'd barely be anything left. Certainly not enough to pay what we owe you. The financial reality was even worse than I'd imagined. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm done lying, he said simply. To you, to myself. Reading that letter from Carson, seeing all our financial secrets laid bare, it was like waking up from a nightmare I've been living in. I can't do it anymore. And Vanessa? What does she say about all this? Andrew's expression darkened. She blames you. Says if you hadn't been so controlling with the house ownership, we could have refinanced years ago and avoided all this. Says her father will find a way to handle you legally. I wasn't surprised. Vanessa had always deflected responsibility, always found ways to cast blame elsewhere. What do you want, Andrew? I asked directly. Why are you here tonight? He took a deep breath. I want to make things right, but I don't know how. We can't pay what we owe you. We're going to lose the house one way or another. And my marriage, I don't think it's going to survive this. The admission hung in the air between us. My son's life was collapsing around him, financially, personally, professionally. Despite everything, my heart ached for him. I don't want revenge, Andrew, I said softly. I never did. I just wanted honesty and respect. I know that now, he nodded. Too late, probably, but I do know it. We talked for hours that night, more openly and honestly than we had in decades, about his childhood after Thomas died, about the pressure he'd felt growing up as the center of my world, about how Vanessa had filled a void in his life with her confidence and certainty. And I shared, too, about my fears of aging alone, about the financial anxiety that had kept me awake nights as my savings dwindled, about my hurt at being gradually excluded from family gatherings and milestones. By the time dawn began to lighten the sky, we had reached an understanding, if not a resolution. Andrew would come clean to Vanessa about our conversation. He would suggest they voluntarily sell the house before the court forced a sale, using the proceeds to pay off their debts and give me whatever was left. Likely far less than I was owed, but something. It won't be enough, he acknowledged. Not financially, and certainly not for all the hurt we've caused. But it's a start. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. The kids miss you, he said. Especially Emma. She asks about you all the time. I miss them too, I admitted. More than I can say. Whatever happens with the house, with Vanessa and me, I don't want them to lose their grandmother. I don't want to lose my mother, even though I've given you every reason to walk away. The words were a balm to wounds I'd thought might never heal. Not a solution to our problems, not a magic fix for the broken trust and financial entanglement, but a recognition of the bond that still existed beneath all the hurt. I'm not going anywhere, Andrew, I said. I never was. The legal and financial untangling took months. As Andrew had predicted, his marriage didn't survive the process. Once Vanessa realized he had spoken to me privately and was advocating for voluntarily selling the house, she moved in with her parents, taking the children with her and filing for divorce shortly after. The colonial house sold for less than its appraised value, a buyer's market combined with the property's need for repairs after years of neglected maintenance. After paying off the mortgage, equity lines, and other secured debts, there was only $78,000 left, a far cry from the $325,000 that represented my ownership share, but more than nothing. Andrew insisted I take all of it. It's not enough, he said when we met with the closing attorney. But it's everything there is, and it belongs to you. Carson had advised me to accept the amount and consider the rest a loss, given the complications of pursuing Andrew personally, for the remainder when he was already facing financial ruin. Sometimes, he told me, you have to know when to close the chapter, even at a loss. And so I did, signing the final papers that ended my financial claim on Andrew, and allowing us both to begin rebuilding our lives separately. Andrew rented a small apartment near the school where he taught, focusing on rebuilding his finances and his relationship with his children, who split time between him and Vanessa. I helped where I could, babysitting Emma and Tyler, contributing to their education funds when possible, being present without expectation or demands. Gradually, hesitantly, Andrew and I established a new kind of relationship, more honest, more equal, with clearer boundaries and greater mutual respect. We didn't pretend the hurt hadn't happened, or that trust could be instantly restored, but we committed to moving forward with greater understanding of each other's needs and perspectives. As for me, life took an unexpected turn. My friendship with Natalie and the book club ladies deepened. I began volunteering at a financial literacy program for women going through divorce or widowhood, using my own experiences, both positive and painful, to help others avoid similar pitfalls. And somewhat to my surprise, I found romance again. David, a retired high school principal who joined our book club's open-to-all summer reading program, asked me to coffee after our discussion of a historical novel. Coffee led to dinner, which led to theater tickets and weekend drives to Coastal. Towns I'd never visited. David was kind, thoughtful, and financially independent, qualities I'd come to value more deeply through my experiences. When he proposed after 18 months of dating, I said yes without hesitation or anxiety about what others might think. We married in a small ceremony in Natalie's backyard garden. Emma was my flower girl, beaming with pride in her new dress. Tyler carried the rings with solemn importance, and Andrew walked me down the aisle, a gesture of reconciliation and support that meant more to me than he could know. "You deserve this happiness, Mom," he told me at the reception, his eyes sincere. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." 5 years have passed since that painful day on my porch when Andrew first uninvited me from his birthday dinner. The journey from that moment to now has been difficult, painful, and at times seemed impossible to navigate. But standing on the other side, I can see how necessary it was. I had to lose what I thought was security, financial and emotional, to find true stability built on self-respect and mutual care rather than sacrifice and obligation. Andrew had to face the consequences of his choices to begin making better ones, and most importantly, we both had to acknowledge that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. It's dependency, a poor substitute for the genuine connection that can only exist between people who value themselves as well as each other. Sometimes I think about that colonial house with its wraparound porch and original woodwork, now home to another family creating their own memories. I don't regret helping Andrew buy it, despite everything that followed. What I regret is not establishing clear expectations and boundaries from the beginning. Not for his sake, but for mine. I've learned that giving everything doesn't make you a better mother or a better person. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do for yourself and those you love is to stand firmly in your own worth and trust others to do the same. That's the legacy I hope to leave Emma and Tyler as they grow. Not endless sacrifice that breeds resentment, but healthy love that nurtures strength, independence, and mutual respect in equal measure. And for myself, I've finally learned that it's never too late to begin again, to prioritize your own needs, to create the life you deserve. Even when, perhaps especially when, it means standing alone for a while until you find others who will stand beside you rather than depend on you to carry them. Some might call it selfish. I call it wisdom, hard-won and precious beyond measure. Up. Next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.